Hello, hello. Welcome to Wool and Spinning. My name is Rachel. I can be found pretty much everywhere as Wool and Spinning. I want to welcome you to this place. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to all the things that we do here and chat about and talk about. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you here. We talk about hand spun in our knitting, in our weaving, making fabric, using our hand spun yarns to make those projects and do those things that we really want to do. We talk about spinning and how to get the yarns that you want to use in fabric. And I think the biggest, most important thing that we do here is we share. We support one another and we share what we're working on and what we're doing and try to inspire one another to continue making and to do all the things that we love doing. So thank you for being here. Everyone is welcome, and I hope that you find something here that is of value. It's really good to welcome everybody in the live stream. Thank you for being here today. We are, of course, streaming at 11 a.m. Pacific here in the southwestern part of British Columbia in Canada. Thank you for being here. So we had quite a big weekend. Nora had quite a competitive soccer tournament up in a city in the interior of British Columbia called Kelowna. It is a town city of approximately 155,000 people. It gets very, very busy in the summer because it is a major boating recreation area. The Okanagan Lakes are massive, they are warm, and they get the most beautiful weather, and it is also wine country. There is wineries as far as the eye can see, as well as stone fruit growers, apple orchards. There's a lot of microbreweries for both cider and beer, and it's just like a real sort of destination for people to check out and to go to. Anyhow, that video that I stitched in after the intro was of part of one side of a very small area of Okanagan, one of the Okanagan Lakes. I think that one was I took a couple of different videos in a couple of different places, and I think that one was South Okanagan Lake. It doesn't really matter. Nobody was out boating. It was too cold and too windy, and there was thunder and lightning storms throughout the weekend, so that was fun. Anyhow, we had a really good weekend. We had a really good drive up and a really good drive back. We came back on Sunday evening because yesterday in Canada, it was the May long weekend. It was a holiday. It was a statutory holiday. And we knew that the highway would be really crazy coming home. So we came home Sunday night, and then we picked up, my mom actually brought James home on Monday. He did not come with us. So for anybody who's not on the Slack channel, Mr. James, my eldest, he broke his arm last weekend. He has a buckle fracture to his left radius, and his cast sort of goes from here to here. They think 3 weeks probably in the cast. Thankfully, it's a buckle fracture and not a full fracture. But the poor guy he's dragging around a casted arm right now. So he's doing okay. He's doing really well. He was in a bike accident. Thankfully, no concussion. He was conscious the whole time, but just a little bit shaken up. So dealing with that. And he stayed with my mom this weekend and had a really great weekend. So I am wearing my Solaris. This is probably one of the most worn knits that I have ever made. I knit it back in 2011. I had to look it up actually before the podcast so I could speak to it because I couldn't remember when I knit it. And I was like, oh, I probably knit it in like 2016, maybe 2015. No, it was before the kids were born in 2011. It was designed by the Barocco design team at that time, and it's called the Solaris. And I knit this in Cascade Eco Plus, and I think it was in the colorway Straw. Anyhow, if you're interested in learning more, I did make a lot of modifications, and they are on my Ravelry page, and you can find it there. I think I'm about 20 seconds delayed from you guys, so I threw it in the chat for you, and you can have a look when and if you're interested. There is a lot going on in the community right now, partially because Rebecca's wrapping up some of the stuff that she's been working on in the Wool Circle, and there's just like a whole bunch of stuff going on in the community at large. There's lots of Zoom groups going on right now. There's just a lot of activity. Our Braid and Color Study, people are really actively working on all of that and on all of their yarn. There is still yarn available, fiber available to participate. All of the links for the Bramble Ridge website and for the Wool and Spinning Braid Blends and Color Study is all linked down below. Just follow the Ketchup and Pickles or go to the show notes on Patreon. The links are all there. For Patreon members and patrons of the community, make sure you use your discount code when you go to checkout. So I think that's all I have to say about all of that. Let's run the housekeeping video, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to throw them in the chat and I will answer. All right, and then the last thing that I wanted to mention quickly, and I just realized my monitor is in the way. Hopefully nothing happens when I move this. My cord, so anybody who's techie will understand, the cord in my monitor that is the one that I move for when I'm live streaming, it is very finicky. And it will like often come undone and it won't stay connected, but this is gonna bother me, so I need to try to move it if I can. Oh, go away. Now I've messed things up. Go away. Okay, there we go. And then let me see if I can just twist this down. It's bothering me. There we go. Okay, sorry, I had to fix that. It was showing, there was like a line right here of the monitor. It just bothers me. Anyhow, WnS Spinning Radio is released for this month. Thank you to those who reached out and said that it wasn't coming up on iTunes. That was my my fault. I find it's the last thing that I do when I'm getting ready, like getting WnS Spinning Radio ready to be published. It's the last piece of the puzzle that I do, and the last 2 months I've just completely forgotten to do it. So thank you to those who reached out and let me know right away. I really appreciate it, because sometimes things just go by the wayside and they just kind of get missed. It's been so crazy around here the last few months, and now that things are calming down and getting into more of a regular routine and back to normal, quote unquote, hopefully that won't keep happening. But it's just the last couple months things were just so off the wall. Anyhow, WnS Spinning Radio is released. Please have a listen to this episode. We have gotten such positive feedback on this one. It is with Lisa Schweitzer, who is a member of our community and a leader in our community and a prolific maker in her own right. Links are available down below in the show notes. So the show notes link is always the very first one in the down bar. It's the one that is links you to the Patreon post, and that has everything in it. And you can go and find that episode on Patreon, or you can listen to it through your audio podcast provider that you use. So, you know, Spotify, iTunes, Audible, whatever you like to use. And yeah, hopefully you really enjoy the episode along with everyone else, because it was a really fun one to record. I hope we can have Lisa back on the podcast again soon. It was just really fun to chat with her, and I kind of took a back seat, which was really fun actually, because Evelyn actually said this, and I agree with her. It was nice for me to be able to take a little bit of a back seat and let Rebecca and Lisa kind of take over and be able to not have to be like on or the leader. It was really nice to be able to let the two of them take over, which was wonderful. So I think that is all of the housekeeping that we needed to cover for today, which is really lovely. We don't have a ton that we have to do. So without further ado, let's run the credits and I'll see you guys on the other side. That was totally what you said, Evelyn. You said we got to view relaxed Rachel instead of in charge Rachel. Yes, that was exactly how you put it. And it was so true. It's really fun for me to be able to kind of sit back sometimes and not be in charge, not be the leader, the founder, the creator. It's really nice to be able to just participate sometimes and take a little bit of back seat, which is really fun. I forgot to put it into the show notes, so of course I'm going to forget to talk about it if I don't mention it really super quickly, but we have our birthday coming up for Woolen Spinning. We wanted to do, you guys are so funny, we wanted to do a sort of a run up to our 10-year Patreon anniversary, which is in June of 2026. We wanted to do like a fun, like run up practice birthday party in June. So that is coming up on June 16th. It is an all-day event on Zoom for patrons of the community. I will chat more about that on June 3rd because I'm hoping to have a few things organized by then, and I'll chat about it some more. But please mark your calendars for June 16th. That's a Monday. I'm thinking that we'll start around 9 in the morning and we'll go till about 9 at night. We have a couple of people that stepped up that said they'd be willing to be on Zoom at various times. If you would like to be one of those people that sort of just make sure that somebody is there throughout the day, please let me know and what time slot maybe would work for you. Me and Rebecca will try and check in throughout the day, but we do need people, like we can't be on Zoom all day. The kids actually have a dentist appointments in the middle of the afternoon, so I'm gonna have to go for a few hours. But yeah, if there's anybody that's interested in jumping in and helping, you don't have to host or anything. We just need people that are there, and that I'd really appreciate that. So thank you to those who already stepped forward, and thank you to those who are willing to step forward as well. You won't be on your own. There's somebody for every single time slot thus far. I have it broken up by 2-hour chunks, so 9 to 11, and then 11 till 1, 1 to 3, and so on. So let me know if you could be one of those people. So for today, I wanted to chat about a recent spin that I finished. Unfortunately, I don't actually have the actual yarn anymore because I had to give it to Melissa of Melly Knits to photograph. So I need to we're gonna sort of talk through it via photos, but I hope that it's still instructive and still helpful. And then I've got some fiber prep that I'm actually a third of the way through spinning that I never talked about on the podcast. I never showed it to you guys because it was during the time when Rebecca did her takeover episode in April. So I kind of just missed talking to you guys about it. So we'll fill you in on that project. I'm really excited about it. I'm a third of the way done spinning, like I said. And then I've got a new cast on that I'm working on because I needed something for in the car on the way to and from Kelowna. Although on the way back, I was so tired. I ended up I didn't knit, I didn't read. I just sat and stared at the scenery, which was probably exactly what I needed. But I'll share a little bit about that. And then I have quite a bit of weaving to share with you, and it's all with hand spun, which is really fun. So let's start with the finished spins that were for my friend Melissa of Melly Knits. It was her Origins Sommelier Fiber Club. It was the 1-year anniversary. So let's start there and we'll chat about that. I love how supportive you guys are. Just, you know, welcoming Lisa and telling her that we're talking about her radio episode and all of that. It's just wonderful. Okay, so sommelier. Melissa is a really dear friend of mine, so I'm going to give her a little bit of a plug here for just a sec because I've been doing a little bit of spinning for her over the last probably about 6 months. I've done a few things for her. This was the 4th or 5th thing that I've done for her, and she kind of hands it off to me at the gym, and then I, take it, spin it for her, give it back to her. It just helps her, get through all of the spinning and all of the stuff that she's got going on. So it's my pleasure to be able to do it for her. And this particular club was so the Sommelier Fiber Club, she's got a whole bunch of different fiber clubs. So if you're familiar with her product and you're familiar with her stuff, you'll know what I'm talking about. But if not, no worries, don't worry about it. You don't need to know. It's just that the Sommelier Fiber Clubs are, I think they're bi-monthly. You get something every other month, I think, if my memory serves. I'm not a part of them. but she has it so that you can either get it, you know, carded, or you can get what she calls the Guts Club, where you just get all the components and then you card it up yourself. There's all, you know, there's a few different like formats, if you will. The one that I did for her this month was her Origins Fiber Club. So it was the original sommelier, the one that she started with. And I'm just going to read this because otherwise I'll completely mess it up. But basically, April marked the 1-year anniversary of the Sommelier Fiber Club. Melissa decided to do something special and create a speed date of the different wools that she featured in the different clubs. So the one that I spun for her was the Origins Anniversary Speed Date, and the color theme was gray and white. So it was a gray-white color theme, and it was basically Sifa the Bond, Sifa the Bond, got to date Dorset. She got to date Astrid, which was a Wensleydale BFL cross. She got to date Mike the Icelandic, and then Pebbles the alpaca. Now, anybody who's seen Melissa's post and read through it and knows the answer, maybe just to hold off on answering, but I was wondering if you guys could say sort of off the top of your head. There was Sifa spun by herself, and then there was Sifa Dorset, and then there was Sifa Wensleydale BFL, Sifa Icelandic, Sifa alpaca. You guys get the idea. Just off the top of your heads, knowing what you know about me and spinning these blends yourself and spinning this stuff yourself. Any guesses which one was my favorite and which one was my least favorite? I would love to hear what you guys think. And then I want to know, I kind of want to know, because I had, going into this, I had some preconceived notions, which we'll talk about in a minute. I also had a couple of surprises. So because I had preconceived notions, I had a couple of really great surprises, which we'll talk about. I just wanted to chat really quickly about what Bond is, because there was an entire Ply magazine issue on Bond, which was really neat, because Bond is one of those wools, I think, that largely gets overlooked. I think that's changing. But sometimes you hear Bond referred to as a commercial Corriedale, or you hear it as described as a Bond Corriedale. So Bond is a cross between Lincoln Rams and Merino Ewes. It is very similar to Corriedale, but Bond is slightly finer, and it's a little bit longer stapled, and it produces heavier fleeces. So I don't know if you guys have noticed, but in the community, those of you who are really active in the community, people who have Bond fleeces, they often are quite a bit, not quite a bit, but they're bigger generally than some of the Corriedale fleeces out there. They definitely are usually heavier. They're a great choice for soft, thick singles. If you're wanting to spin singles yarns, but not necessarily wanting to use merino, Bond is a really great substitute. Just sort of fun fact. So let me show you what I did with the club. I love the guesses that you guys are throwing up there. So Christine thinks that the Bond alpaca would be my least favorite. Eve thinks that the Dorset would be my most favorite. Eveline thinks that the Wensleydale would be my favorite, but the alpaca would be my least favorite. Dion thinks the Wensleydale mix would be my favorite as well. A lot of you think that the Wensleydale BFL would be my favorite. That's really interesting. Yeah, I hear you, Sam. I think some of these fleeces, some of these wools that sort of have been developed in the US or have been imported into the US, they are hard to find elsewhere. I know Australia is a great source for Bond. Give Sifa a break. I was thinking it was a cross too, but I was like, give Sifa a break, you meanies. Okay, so oh, Rebecca, I love you. She says, I was half paying attention and I thought we were talking about crossbreed offspring sheep from these dates, and then we got to alpaca. It's so funny. That is hilarious. Nope, we're gonna blend these together and see which ones are our favorites. So let me find the Sommelier Club, and I'll show you all the photos, because the photos are really fun to look at and they were really fun to spin, and I will press pause on some of these. Okay, so let's just go back. Okay, these are a little bit out of order, so just bear with me, but this yarn here was the Dorset. So that lock there that's sitting next to the hand spun yarn, that was the Dorset. So this was 50-50 Bond and Dorset. So Sifa 50%, Bond 50%, Dorset. This yarn was really, really interesting because it had a very ivory look to it when it was finished, and it was incredibly bouncy. And when you see this skein next to the other skeins, it lost a lot in the washing in terms of like it just went vroom, and it's quite a bit shorter than the other yarns. So typical of what we would expect from Dorset, that 3-dimensional crimp that just cinches up in the washing and activates and you know, pulls it in for just this really bouncy, springy yarn. It had incredible bulk. So that means like when I crunched it down with my hand, it just, as soon as I let go, it just sprung right back to life. A little bit chalky to feel, very springy, very springy, like I said. And for me, I could wear this next to my skin, but I don't know that I would want it as a cowl or something right here, but definitely a sweater. And this as a 3-ply, I made it a 2-ply, but if I had done it as a 3-ply, it would have been just an ideal sweater yarn. So definitely my favorite in terms of a sweater yarn. Thinking about yarn structure, maybe not so great for weaving in terms of just the bounciness of it. It would just be so unbelievably springy in the warp. It would be a little bit difficult to get good tension, which I'll talk about later in the show. So put a pin in that. We'll come back to that at the end of the show. But would make just a really spongy piece of fabric, really springy, really like just, you know, with really good bulk, like it would just bounce back. But definitely sweater yarn. 3-ply would have been incredible, and it had that lovely ivory color to it. Maybe partially because of the yellow tips of the Dorset, it kind of gave it that slightly ivory look, but it didn't take away from the yarn at all. It was just a beautiful fiber to spin. You could feel in the spinning, you could feel the Dorset, you could feel that bouncy spring in there, and you could feel that sponginess that we associate with Dorset. This is Mike. So this is the Icelandic, and that is the Icelandic lock. For those who have not seen Icelandic locks before and are a brand new spinner and are sort of curious about all of this stuff, the Icelandic locks are exactly how this one looks. And you can see if you look at the bottom of the photo there, do you see that kind of fuzzy area of the bottom of the lock? That is that downy undercoat that we associate with Icelandic. So you could actually pull these apart and you would have the tog and the thell, and you'd have them separate. This is carded all together, so the tog and the thell all went into the yarn. And again, it's 50-50 Icelandic and bond. To be totally and completely honest, which I always am on the podcast when it comes to this kind of stuff, I don't know how I feel about this yarn. It was not my least favorite, but it was not my favorite. It was sort of somewhere in the middle of the pack. Would I spin an entire sweater worth of this yarn? I'm not sure. However, the finished yarn is very drapey, and it has a really lovely hand to it. Like, it just feels lovely. It has a slight halo from those tips of the Icelandic poking out. I actually think this would be an incredible weaving yarn. It doesn't have a ton of elasticity, although it does have a little bit. I didn't measure it, but based on articles that I've written for Ply Magazine around elasticity, I know that this does in fact have some elasticity, just not maybe as much as the Dorset would have. Like the Dorset, you could pull on it quite a lot. This one, not so much. It has more drape, more of a gentle hand, a drapey hand. I don't know how else to describe it. Has a little bit of luster from that brown Icelandic, which is really lovely. And again, as a 2-ply, maybe even spun slightly finer. I tried to spin these all at the same grist, roughly 14 wraps per inch, 16 wraps per inch. This would be an incredible weaving yarn. So definitely something to keep in mind if you're thinking sort of weaving, creating a really lovely fabric for something that would drape, you know, a cardigan like this, but woven, that would just drape and hang really beautifully. This yarn would be an incredible one to choose. So a 50-50 fine wool with an Icelandic, any of the, I think you would have gotten a very similar result from Shetland as well. It just gave a really beautiful hand. Little bit tougher in this spinning when I first started spinning it, and this was part of the reason why I wasn't loving spinning it at first. It was really easy to pull the Icelandic out of the fiber prep. So if you weren't careful, I could actually physically separate them so that I had all bond in the palm of my hand while I pulled all of the long fibers of the Icelandic out. So something to keep in mind, I had to spin it with a very light hand and really make sure that I was grabbing multiple fibers. Yeah, it would also make a very warm fabric. Rebecca says, I find Icelandic in blends tough because since it's so crimpless. You know what? That's a really good thought, Rebecca, I think that's probably part of what I was feeling, because when we get to the photo of the bond and of the crimp in the bond, you'll see how much crimp it had. It really was a fine wool. It's a beautiful fleece. Against the Icelandic, it's not that it didn't work, but it wasn't my favorite. Here's the bond on its own. I was wondering where that photo was. It was supposed to come up first, but that's okay. No problem. No harm, no foul. This is the bond. So this is Sifa spun by herself. This yarn, it is beautiful. I was really, really proud of how this came out. It was just a little sample of about 11 or 12 grams. And that is the lock. So you can see the crimp in that. I suspect, I think I did measure it at one point, but I think it had like 10 or 12 crimps per inch when I checked the lock, something like that. And the yarn is just beautiful. It's bouncy, it's springy, it's soft. With a little bit more crimp added, a little bit more twist added, you could spin a beautiful 3-ply sweater yarn that would be hard wearing, slightly longer stapled, so you'd have a really durable yarn. And next to the skin soft, you could have a sweater that was right up around your neck and it would just be divine to wear. This yarn was beautiful, and I have to say, out of the 5 samples, this was my favorite. Next, oh, and this was a close-up of the lock by itself, just so you guys could get a sense of what it looked like close up. It's nice to be able to have that visual to really be able to see it. So if you want to study it more, press pause here, but we're going to keep on going. Okay, this one, if I was to rate out of 5, so the bond on its own was my absolute most favorite. The Icelandic was somewhere in the middle in terms of being sort of, you know, not my favorite, not my least favorite, but somewhere in the middle. This yarn wins the prize for being the most surprising, and I actually liked it the second best. So right now I would say the bond was my absolute most favorite, and then this yarn, which was the 50-50 bond alpaca, and then the Dorset, and then the Icelandic. This yarn was all surprises all the time from beginning to end. So this particular little beauty was, all of the prep from the club came in like a battling, like a little battling that was sort of varying anywhere from 12 grams to 18 grams of fiber for each of them. And so all of them I split in half. I weighed them to make sure they were relatively equal. I spun them to a bobbin, wound them off onto a weaving bobbin, and then spun the next, and then wove that off onto a weaving bobbin and then plied them. It just meant the easiest bobbin management, basically. So this one, I split it all up. It was incredibly soft. The alpaca, you can see that crimp in this particular alpaca. It had a really lovely crimp. It was soft, it was light. As soon as I started spinning, nothing pulled forward. Like, it wasn't like the Icelandic where it pulled forward and separated from the bond. Everything just came together beautifully. So every time I drafted, it was even, it was easy to get a really consistent drafting triangle, whereas that wasn't necessarily the case with some of the other ones, particularly the Icelandic and the Wensleydale BFL Cross. But this one, in terms of like fiber management while you were spinning, it was easy peasy lemon squeezy. I think this yarn, besides the bond on its own and the Dorset on its own, these 3 came out the most consistent. I was able to draft incredibly consistently, and the finished yarn has lovely bounce to it, not quite as much as the Dorset or the bond on its own, for sure. It has that drape that we expect from the alpaca, but it still has a bounce and sproing to it, but it has a beautiful hand, and it just, the drape is incredible while still being a bit bouncy and springy like we expect from wool. It was like the best of the alpaca and the best of the bond put together, and it was easy peasy to spin. Not slippery, it wasn't fly away, it was just perfect. It was also very well blended, and again and again and again, when I spin blends that have alpaca in it, I didn't have an allergic reaction, which was great. I've really seen again and again and again, when there's alpaca in there, it's got to be beautifully blended. As long as it's beautifully blended for myself, I've had really good results. It's just that I'm sensitive to alpaca, certain alpaca it seems, and I get these huge like allergic reactions. I get really stuffy and I get itchy, and so I stay away from alpaca and llama for that reason, because I always have a reaction. This is one of the first times I've spun it in the last couple of years. I had 0 reaction whatsoever. So either Melissa made sure it was unbelievably clean and it didn't have any dander to it, I suspect that that's the case. So finding really, really clean alpaca, or maybe wearing a mask when I'm cleaning it and getting it really beautifully scoured, is going to be the trick, so that I can work with it a little bit more, because this is beautiful yarn. Yes, Lisa, the dark horse. That's right. I know. Total shock, right, Dion? Total shock. Okay. This was my least favorite. This was the Wensleydale BFL Cross. So it was 50-50 Wensleydale BFL Cross with the bond. You can see the lock there. It's very, very long. It had a beautiful crimpy kind of curling crimp to it. That sounds terrible, but you know what I mean? It kind of has that doll's hair crimp to it. Very, very, very soft. This is incredibly soft yarn. Just like with the Icelandic, the Wensleydale BFL wanted to separate. I think if with the Icelandic and with this one, I think if I had spun them long draw, I probably wouldn't have had that that feeling that they were wanting to separate. But because I was spinning continuous backward, because I wanted to spin them all the same way, I wanted the same grist, I wanted to have the same experience with all of them, and then be able to compare. This one, same thing. Like the first couple of inches of yarn, I was only pulling Wensleydale BFL, and I realized I just had to lighten up my how much I was holding the yarn, like how tightly. I tend to hold the yarn very, very lightly anyways, the fiber. And my fiber supply hand tends to be very, very light, but I had to make sure that I was reaching back and grabbing all fibers. In all honesty, I just don't like the black with the white. I don't like the effect of the yarn. I don't like what it looks like. I don't like the aesthetic. I suspect there are people in our community that are watching right now that are like, what are you talking about? I love that. It's just not, I just didn't like it. The finished yarn, it's very, very difficult to see the singles that make up the 2-ply. They are very fuzzy. They kind of just blend together, more like what you expect from a woolen spun yarn, which is fine. It's just a comment. It's just an aesthetic thing. It was also, this was the one that was the most difficult to keep consistent when spinning. I could feel every so often that a chunk of bond would come through, and it's probably just because it was kind of like a bit stuck. Like it was just a bit of a chunk that came through with the Wensleydale BFL. I think the Wensleydale BFL spun on its own would just be absolutely divine. Like divine. But blended with the bond, it left me feeling a bit So that was my least favorite. And I do love Wensleydale, and this Wensleydale BFL Cross was absolutely beautiful. I wish you guys could all reach through the monitor and feel the lock. It is so soft. But spinning it alongside the bond, I felt like you sort of compromised the bond, and then you also compromised the BFL Wensleydale, whereas spun on their own, they would have been incredible. But for me, putting them together wasn't necessarily the best. Does that make sense? I would have loved to have had them separate. Yeah, exactly, Rebecca. It's why it's so hard to spin long and short fibers together. And if you remember from the bond lock was probably about 3/4 of the length of the Wensleydale BFL lock. So if I were to do this, I was going to say, if I were to do this for a sweater spin or a piece of cloth, this would make incredible cloth, woven cloth. This would just be awesome. It has beautiful drape. It has a lovely hand to it. It would just be awesome in woven cloth. Spun a little bit finer, it would just be amazing. I would be tempted to cut the Wensleydale BFL lock to be the same length as the bond. But then you compromise, like the Wensleydale BFL lock is so beautiful that I wouldn't necessarily want to cut it. It's also really unusual to come across a truly black fleece. So this black Wensleydale BFL, in some ways, I'd want to keep it on its own because it's a black fleece. And those are really special to come across. So there's that too. It was easy to spin, but like I said, not quite as consistent as I would want it. So we'll let this play through. These are some of the photos of the yarns just like lined up together and sort of how they differed. The Icelandic had the gentlest twist angle. The Wensleydale had the gentlest twist angle, but the Dorset, which is this one here, had the most severe twist angle. It was able to take the twist more so. The alpaca one was sort of in the middle, and the Wensleydale BFL again was a very gentle twist angle. So again, totally different yarns. Totally different aesthetic, different effects. And I think I have a photo of Maybe I don't have it. It's going through again. No, I don't. There was a great photo that I had that I can post in the Slack channel actually of the 5 yarns sort of lined up so that you can see how much shorter the Dorset one was. The alpaca one was slightly shorter, but not as short as the Dorset. It was about the same as the bond spun on its own. So the Dorset, I lost the most length, and the Wensleydale BFL and the Icelandic, which is right here, those two I didn't lose any length whatsoever. They stayed nice and long and drapey. So yeah. Lisa has a great question. Was this a bond that was blended with Wensleydale BFL, or was it a bond Wensleydale BFL blend? It was a bond fleece blended with a Wensleydale BFL cross. So 2 fleeces and then blended together on the carders by Melissa. Yeah. Tessa, I'm actually going to talk to Melissa tonight at the gym because I was going to ask her if I could have them back so that I could swatch them, because I actually think that that would teach us even more about something like this. I wanted to chat really quickly before we move on about this type of sampling. Over the years of having the podcast and doing all of this with you guys, because it's been about 11 years now that I've had the podcast. And of course, I've gone through my own learning curve and gone through my own learning journey. And then some of you have been going through your journey parallel to mine. And I think one of the things, like we talk about sampling, and I did that spin to knit a toque or hat for the School of Sweet Georgia, which is sort of about this, like how do we go about sampling? How do we make the yarns that we want to make? And I think one of the things that I've really started to enjoy and gain the most knowledge from is by taking these different fibers, these different wools, taking the different fleeces from the fleece, not necessarily from the comb top or from the roving, but actually from the fleece and working from the fleece and putting them together. You know, what happens when you put a Shetland with a Corriedale? What happens when you put some of these other fibers together and actually make these blends right from sort of the raw goods? I find I learn more from exercises like this. They're time consuming, don't get me wrong, they are time consuming, but I learn more from exercises like this, and I sort of catalog things in my mind around like what I think maybe will work and what maybe doesn't work by doing exercises like this. So if you're sort of in your journey and you're feeling like you've come to a little bit of a learning plateau and you'd like to give yourself a little bit of challenge and maybe try some new things, I would highly recommend, even if like your alpaca in your stash is comb top and maybe the Icelandic is comb top, it doesn't matter. Just try some of these blends and do a little bit of a speed date for yourself. For me, Sifa did really well on her own, and I liked Sifa just on her own. But she did beautifully with the Dorset. She did beautifully with the alpaca. The other two, I'll leave up to you guys. I will also say that what we look for in yarns to knit with and yarns to crochet with versus what we look for in yarns to weave with is maybe a little bit different. And maybe some of those attributes that we look for in these different types of fabrics will inform how we go about these sampling projects in the future. And I have to admit, I have a couple of things in my stash that I'm actually going to do another speed date, but create it myself and see what I come up with, because there's a couple of things that I maybe never would have put together or maybe thought about. And now it's kind of percolating in my mind going, oh, I wonder if that would actually work better than I thought that it would. I really loved that silvery alpaca with the white wool. That worked really, really beautifully. It's created a beautiful gray without having to go to the dye pots. So there is that to think about. The Dorset and the Sifa, and Sifa on her own, the bond 100%, that's the one in the middle there. And then the Dorset is the one right next to my hand right here. Those two are slightly different white. So the one in the middle, the Sifa on her own, is quite a stark white that we would associate with white wool. But the Dorset is slightly ivory. And sometimes that can really change how the dye takes to these wools and how they come out in the long run. The other thing I would love to see is the Wensleydale BFL, that black fleece, dyed. Because if you used a really rich jewel tone, something really garish and really bright, 2% depth of shade, it would get into that white wool and it would create just this really beautiful effect overall, because it wouldn't be garish in the finished yarn. You just have like a really bright dye. It would be maybe a bit difficult to exhaust, but the black would just bring it down and mute it and create this a lot of not tension. It would create a lot of like moodiness, and it would just really, I'm thinking of like a jewel blue, like it would just be so incredible. So when we're looking at these different blends, we're looking at what kind of fabric do we want to create? What are the attributes that we want out of that fabric, and what are we going to do with that fabric? How many plies do we need to be able to create that fabric that we want to create? You know, I often go to 3 or more plies for sweaters. That's just my kind of default now. But for weaving, I want a 2-ply or even maybe a singles. What are the fibers that are going to do what I want to do? So we're kind of working backward. So the fibers that are going to do what I want to do, that'll eliminate some of them and elevate others. And then how do I go about creating that? You know, do I want to have some more add-ins? Do I want to put in sparkle? Do I want to have some sari silk in there for some color? Do I want maybe just silk? You know, do I want, what else can I add in that would create the fabric that I want to create? So we're kind of working our way backwards when we have samples like this, and we can kind of look at each of them and look at them discerningly and critically and sort of start to decide what we're looking for, and then change how we do our next set of samples to spin for that thing that we're looking for. Oh, fluorescent lemon. Yes, that would make the grello. That's right, Dion. I hadn't even thought of that. That's beautiful. All I could see in my mind was like that garish, like bright cobalt blue in there. That was sort of what I saw in my head. I know there are people in our community that really love this kind of sampling and this type of play and experimentation, and I really encourage you guys to start creating them for yourselves and then to share so that we can all learn. Yeah. All right. So that's sommelier, and I hope if you guys have any questions, let me know, but it was really fun to do. Thank you to Melissa for letting me do this one for her. I wasn't sure I was going to be able to do it. She gave it to me, and then I was like, oh, I don't know, I'm not feeling 100% because this was back in April, and then as I started to feel better and got some energy back, this was perfect. It wasn't onerous, it wasn't too much. I could get one sample done and feel like I'd accomplished something. And to be honest with you, it actually really reinvigorated my love of sampling. This really got my creative juices flowing. All right, I do have some spinning to share with you, and it also is a bit of fiber prep. So let's do that next. And this is my project that I was working on in April when I wasn't chatting with you guys, when I had those few weeks off. So it's really fun to be able to update you guys a little bit on some of what I'm working on. Okay, I'm really excited to share this with you guys because I picked this up at Fibers West back in March, and I had gone with the plan of not really purchasing anything, but then I saw this fleece. It was already, it was not washed, so I had to wash and scour it, and it came in this beautiful bag. It was from my friend Sherry Stewart of Corriedale Textiles. She's up in Maple Ridge, which is across the bridge from me. So for those who know sort of the geography of the greater Vancouver area in British Columbia, we have a lot of bridges and we have a lot of water. It's when I was growing up, it often would remind me of like when we go down to Portland. I was like, oh yeah, all these bridges. This is like what Vancouver's like. And I saw it and I couldn't resist it. So I think this, let me just make sure I have the right, let me go to, hang on you guys. So this, it's not a great photo. I'm really sorry. And actually I've processed all of it now. So I forgot to save a lock, which is not like me at all. But this is what it looked like originally. So this is a New Zealand Corriedale. It's, they called it mocha, which is probably about what it, like that's probably pretty accurate. Unfortunately, my countertop is a very similar color. So that's why it's sort of the camera, my camera phone kind of washed it all out. But you can see there, the discerning eye can see there that the crimp in this was unbelievable. And that's actually what sold me on it and why I bought it. I ended up with, ooh, it was exactly a pound pre-washing. And post-washing, I had about 330 grams left. So 454 to start, and then I had losses in the washing and also the lock popping. I didn't lose a ton. I was really surprised how much, this is all lock popped here. I was really surprised at how much I saved. I lost less than 100 grams. I say 330, but I think it was more like 360 360 or 370 now that I'm thinking about it. I have it all written down on a different piece of paper. Anyhow, basically what I did was after I washed and scoured it, because it was only a pound, I put it all into one bag and I scoured that. I did 2 washes and 3 rinses. My first wash had 2 tablespoons of power scour and the second wash had 1 tablespoon of power scour. This was not dirty at all. This was definitely a hand spinner's fleece. I probably could have gotten away with actually just the 1 scour with the 2 tablespoons of power scour. This fleece like should win awards. It is just beautiful. Minimal waste in the lock popping. It was basically just pop, 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 and that was done. And I had almost over 300 grams done right away. And you can see how big the bats are that came off my carder. I'll share that with you guys in just a second. So from there, once I had everything lock popped, I threw it on my carder. This is my new carder, my big one, my fancy kitty. I have a little Tom. It is the wide little Tom. So it's the double wide. It's really big. This carder is really big. I'm not sure. I really like it and I'm glad that I have it and I'm so thankful that I got it. But it's really big. So it's 50 pounds and which is what, 22 kilos. It's hard to heft around and it's difficult to find a spot to store it, to have it accessible to actually use it. So just some things to think about when you're looking at carders yourself. Just because I have it doesn't mean that it's the right carder for everyone. It's a big carder. Anyways, I didn't have to do anything with these locks. I didn't put them on my blending board first. I didn't do anything with them. I literally just fed them on lock by lock because this was the second or third pass of the bat. Because they were so perfect that they just carded up absolutely beautifully. So let me go back to the main camera for just a sec because I do have other photos for you. But sometimes it's fun to show you stuff in real life. So I'm just going to move back from the camera a little bit. And I wanted to show you the size of the bat. So what I did was I took all of the fiber and I divided it up equally into 3 bundles. So I had all of the bats, sort of the first few passes. I only carded these 3 times, which, you know, we're constantly saying in the community, you've got to card it multiple times. And usually 2 or 3 times is not enough. And usually you need to do it 4 or 5 times. This fiber was so perfect and so beautiful, it should win awards. That I ended up actually only carding it 3 times and it came off just beautifully. So these bats are incredible. So this is, oh, and I never said the farmer. It's from Anna Grafton in New Zealand. But this is the bat. You can see how big it is. It's quite a large bat that came off my carder. This is over 100 grams. This is about 115 grams. And I had 3 of these. So that's the bat. And I don't want to manhandle it too much because I obviously don't want to get it fuzzy and wrecked and so on and so forth. And what I do with my bats is I just fold them in 4. I find that's the easiest thing to do. And then what I've been doing, so this is all prepped. The second bat is all prepped because I've spun the first bat. And we'll talk about that in just a sec. But what I did last night, I was so tired after the weekend and I haven't been sleeping really super well. And the last 2 nights I've had really good night sleeps. But as you can hear, my voice is a little bit strained. And that's totally fatigue. So anyhow, yesterday I sat quietly and split the second bat up because the first bat is done. And so I just sat there and split up, and rather than putting it on my little drum carder and making little nests like I so often do, this just doesn't need it. It just does not require it at all. So I've just been sitting quietly and just drafting them out and splitting the bat up into these little nests so that I get this beautiful prep. See if I can put it in front of my face so you guys can see. It's just divine. It is so nice. So nice. This is like grade A prep, just beautiful. And I've just been pre-drafting them. I've pre-drafted all of them already. I have a lot of these little nests. So my second bat It's about 115 grams, like I said. It made all of these. All of these. There's a scale in there. That's what's making the banging sound. So that is ready to spin. And this is the bobbin, the first bobbin. So I had ply back samples and they were beautiful. And I had a 2-ply and a 3-ply. And I have no idea where they went. So I think from being away this weekend, I probably put them somewhere and then I haven't pulled them back out again, but I'll either make new ones for next week or I will find them. It's the only two options. This fleece was about 20 microns and the staple was between 3.5 and 4.5 inches. I have to say the majority of what I processed out of that fleece, almost all of them were close to 4.5 inches. And so I spun up the first bat and I worked on that last week. Both of the kids have had a lot of schoolwork, James especially. And so I just sat quietly and I just spun and spun and spun next to him because he just wanted somebody sitting with him while he worked his way through, especially because his arm was sore and he had quite a lot to do and he got a little bit behind because of his arm. And I've just been working my way through. So my plan, I'm going to do a Rebecca and I'm going to try to batch this. So I'm hoping that this week I'll get the second bobbin done and then next week I'll get the third bobbin done. And then I'll be able to ply in a couple of weeks. I'd really like to have this done and have it plied. It is going to be a 3-ply. I don't know if it'll be enough for a sweater. So then when I was spinning, I was sort of thinking, well, maybe I should just do a 2-ply and make some woven fabric. And the reason for the potential pivot is because when I did a bunch of sampling for a recent WnS magazine article, one of the pieces of fabric that I did, at the end of one of the warps, I had enough warp left to sort of do some playing and just fart around basically with the warp. And this was Cormo. And so this here is basket weave 2x2, which is really, really pretty. But this final sample was plain weave. And so we're looking at the part with the red. It's sort of got the red and the grello and the green. It was a 3-ply sock yarn from me and Katrina's book from Unbraided. It was just a leftover little bit. And I put it on a shuttle. And I basically did pick for pick. So 1 pick of the Cormo, 1 pick of the color, 1 pick of the Cormo, 1 pick of the color. And then as you can see, the warp was all Cormo. So you've kind of got like this, like little windows, right? Because each of these little squares where you've got color is surrounded by the white. So then here I am spinning. We're not supposed to be pivoting our projects when we're halfway through the spinning, but anyways, I'm breaking all the rules with this one. I was spinning and I was thinking about this color and weave experiment, which is so easy to create. Like it's fine wool, it's bouncy, it's springy, it's just got a lovely hand to it. And it's just plain weave. You'd have 2 bobbins going, one of the Corriedale, one of the color. And I just kept thinking like maybe the brown in between a really beautiful yarn in between that would maybe be, instead, this is quite high contrast, but I started thinking like, what would it look like low contrast? Now I don't know if I should follow that or not. I don't know. So now I'm torn. And that's okay because I have lots of spinning left to do and I can always, the second bobbin, I can always break it up into 2 and do a 2-ply. That would be totally fine. I can always pivot. But the tiny window panes are just so beautiful. And I have, where is it? Right here. Da, 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 da. I have Mushroom Hunt on Hanui, which is very similar to the Corriedale in bounce and sproing and feel and blah, blah, blah. And I spun it the same way and I haven't plied it yet because this is going to be a 2-ply. So I just have to wind it off onto 2 bobbins. And I was thinking I could do the color and this would be the main, right? Right? be a little bit low contrast, especially in the areas where you hit this kind of orange color, right? Like how pretty would that be? How pretty. So, I don't know. I'm thinking. The wheels are turning. I do like the high contrast of the white. This worked really, really super well because it was Falkland. No, it was Polworth and Silk was the red and the greeny yellow. It was Nest Fiber Studios and her Fiddlesticks colorway. For those who are interested in looking up, it was one of her vintage colorways. And then the Cormo. So the Cormo and the Polworth worked really beautifully, and that was why that particular sample worked so well. But from a color and weave perspective, it kind of got me thinking like, ooh, I wonder what else I could do with that, as well as recreating this. I just don't have enough of this particular like braid or colorway, but I have a lot of other stuff that would work as well. And I have braids in my stash that would work as well. So this is another project for another day, with another fleece that's white and fine and bouncy and springy will make the fabric that I want it to make, which is this. So lots and lots and lots to think about. Lots to think about, you guys. So much, so much. Okay, let's talk about knitting next. Yeah, 1 ply of each Dion. That's a really great idea too. You could do a marled yarn, and then that in your warp, you could just have that. Yeah, thanks you guys. That would be gorgeous, Tessa says. Thank you. Yeah, baby, you guys are awesome. Yeah, so it's kind of left me with this like, oh, I wonder. I think one of the things that I keep coming back to again and again as well is I really want to use some of the yarns that are in my stash that I can sort of weave through, spin through, create some fabric with that aren't enough to make like sweaters with, but I can maybe weave off as some samples, weave off as some projects that are a little bit smaller, just to get sort of a sense. This dovetails really beautifully into another project that we're going to talk about later, but just to kind of give me some ways to use up some of the yarns I've already spun and learn based on the decisions that I made back then, what could I do in the future. I just want to get some of these yarns out of my stash and use them up. Yeah. Yeah, totally, Pauline. This is my mojo. My mojo is back, that is for sure. It's been a long time since I felt really fired up and excited about what I'm working on. It's really nice. It's really nice to feel that again. All right, let's talk about my knitting project. I'm going to drag Diana over here, and she is going to do the modeling, and I will do the chatting. Okay, we haven't had Diana featured like up close and personal for a little while, so it is my pleasure to have her join us. I started a new knit on the weekend, and it was because I didn't want to bring a bunch of color work with us. I wasn't sure how much waiting around we were going to do at the tournament and how much kind of just like there was big gaps between the games, and the weather wasn't very good, and I just wanted something to work on that I didn't really have to think too much about. So when this was published, I wanted to knit it, and I thought that I could probably play around with the gauge. And this is Haley's newest pattern. She goes by Ozetta, that's like her design name. And it's the Lakes cardigan. And this is actually done with an Aran weight wool on quite large needles. I think they're US size 9s, 5.5mm needles. And I was drawn to it immediately because of the tweed. And I have been trying to figure out for the last year, almost year, not quite a year, what to do with my Hauser yarn that I did back in 2023. And if you guys remember this yarn, I've got some photos actually to show you that we can play through while we're chit-chatting. This was a combination spin. This was for our contrast of proportion work that we did on our year of color when we were studying the color contrast. And this was a combo spin of Targhee, and it was blue, and then Polworth and Silk that was sort of this orangey, had some hits of green in it, some hits of yellow. And I did these different proportions and added different things. And this was ultimately the yarn that I ended up on. So all of these yarns were spun using, oh my gosh, stop. So this was the final yarn. These were all, it's just not cooperating, so I'm just going to let it play through. Okay, this photo here. These were all, why is it not stopping? Oh, duh. Okay, here we go. These were all different ply structures. So the one on the very bottom, that sort of gold one, was a standard 4-ply, and then the one in the middle was a cabled yarn, and the one up top here that's closest to me was a 4-ply Hauser yarn. And Rebecca's done a lot of teaching around Hauser. We've done a lot of discussion around Hauser in the teaching content on Patreon. We've done a lot on Hauser over the years. And that was ultimately the yarn that I settled on, mostly because I really, really liked the blue and I loved the additional of the sari silk. I wasn't super keen on that gold, and I don't love spinning cabled yarns. So ultimately what I ended up doing was blending all of it together, and I settled on this yarn here. And then from there, I did a big gauge swatch, which you can see is photographed under that skein of yarn. And this gauge swatch gave me a lot of information about the yarn because it was 3 different needle sizes, and it was a US size 5, US size 4, and a US size 4.5. So it was sort of like a mixture of different yarns. US size 4, 5, 6, which was 3.5, 3.75, and 4 millimeter. And as it became more open and as it became more loose and got up to the 4 millimeter, it just, it didn't have the same structure. The fabric was too open, it was too boggy. It wouldn't wear, I know that this wouldn't wear really super well in a sweater. Whereas the 3.5 millimeter, which was at the bottom here, was denser. It had a much nicer hand to it. It was bouncy and springy. All of it is next to the skin soft. Maybe the 3.75 would have been a good compromise right in the middle, but even then, the 3.5 was just right. It was sort of Goldilocks in that sense. So I skeined up all of these yarns. I have about 900 yards of yarn, so not a ton, but enough for a cardigan and enough for, I'll do the sleeves first and then I'll just knit the body until I run out of yarn, basically. So the Lakes cardigan is actually really interesting in its the way that it's designed. I'm just going to move my camera here ever so slightly so you guys can see the top here. It's a really interesting construction. So you actually cast on up here and you knit the saddle down to a certain length, and then you break your yarn, which I hate having to do, but it's just the way it is with some patterns. It's just the way the construction is. And you knit your other one. And you can see here that actually, you know, by and large, there's not a lot of striping. Like there's a little bit of a blue patch here, but in real life, like the camera's showing it more. So in real life, there is no color difference. You can see how homogeneous it actually is knitting up, which I was a little bit concerned about. Even though I had the swatch and I knew that it was overall pretty homogeneous, you don't really know until you get the bigger pieces of fabric. And what I really liked about the pattern actually, she actually recommends using the saddle, the first saddle that you knit as your gauge swatch. She's like, knit it, block it, wash it, see if you're anywhere close, and then keep on going. And you've already done one of your saddles, which I think is brilliant. And you can see here, this is where I got to on the weekend on our way home. You start to build out your back afterwards. So this is all shaped with short rows back here to lift up your back neck. And you're going to knit down to a certain distance, certain depth. I'm almost there. And then you're going to pick up stitches, knit down the front, and then you're going to connect and knit everything down together. Afterwards, you go back and pick up some of your button band and you knit your sleeves. You put your sleeve stitches on hold eventually, and then you knit down your sleeve. So really cool construction, a neat construction. And so far, so good with the yarn. I will say the yarn is splitty. As I'm knitting with it, and I think part of it too was that I was tired, and we had a really long drive. We had quite a long drive on, what day was it? On Friday. We left at, I think we picked Mike up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we got into Kelowna at 7 because we did stop. We grabbed some food, and I think as I was knitting, I could just feel every so often that I didn't catch all of the strands of the hauser, and I think it's just I had this when I knit with hauser for sock yarn as well for my socks. I had to keep making sure that I didn't split the stitches, and it's same thing with the sweater yarn. It's just, for me, it's just a bit splitty, and I think it's just the way that it's plied. It's the construction. You're taking two ply yarns that have been applied in the same direction, and then you're putting them together in the opposite direction. And I think it just, for me, it, for whatever reason, it just makes it a bit splitty in sections. So, oh, that's good. Rebecca's haven't been splitting, so that's great. She's been knitting with her hauser sock yarn, and it hasn't been. That was the yarn that she chatted about on the wool circle. So I'm glad to hear that. It's just been my experience both times that it's been quite splitty. So it's just me, I guess, which is fine. That's okay. This yarn is a blend, just for those who are curious, it's a blend of Targhee, organic Polworth, and silk, 80-20. That was a braid. And then I did add about 5% of the sari silk, and that's what gives it that tweedy texture, which is kind of cool. It's a very gray, very muted blue color. It looks like it was dyed gray, but that's the combination of the complements, the yellow and the blue together, which of course I love. Okay, let's talk about weaving. I have a couple of things to share with you, and I'm really excited to share it. So let's do weaving, and then we'll call it a day. I don't think we'll do, I didn't organize the community participation for this week. You guys have been sharing so much in the Slack channel and on the Ravelry group and stuff. But I knew that I had a lot to update you and share with you today. So we'll do community participation next time. So let's do weaving, and then we'll call it a day. Okay, so weaving has been very interesting. Let's talk about a shameless self-promotion plug for just a second. You're probably wondering why this magazine is sitting here, but there is a reason. This is the very first issue, summer 2025, of WnS magazine. So as you can see, it looks very similar to Ply magazine. This is its sister magazine. So there's now Ply magazine for hand spinners and WnS magazine for hand weavers. Very first issue, it is on plain weave. And I have an article in here, and I was so humbled when Lisa Graves, the editor, co-editor with JC Boggs Faulkner, approached me to ask me if I wanted to contribute an issue to the magazine. I just, yeah, it was very humbling, and I really appreciated both of them for thinking of me and for asking me. So this is my article here. It spans over 6 pages. It is absolutely beautiful. And the article is on twist direction and how that affects our finished fabrics. So when we spin and ply S, or we spin and ply Z. So these were the yarns that I spun for it. It was a Romney C-cell blend, and this was a little bit of fiber that I sent to them. You can see the sheen. It was beautiful to work with. And then these are a whole bunch of the samples that I wove. In total, I wove, was it 10 samples? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 samples. That's right, 13 samples for the article. So this was spun S, plied Z, spun Z, plied S, and then the opposite. Those samples there. And I did warp and weft was the hand spun. So warp was the hand spun, weft was the hand spun. It was all the same yarn, just spun in different directions. And then these were more of the samples that I did for the article. So different combinations, different types. I included twill in the sampling process. It was on plain weave, but I did include twill because twill teaches us so much, because with the fewer interlacements, interesting things happen in twill. I was warping the looms anyways, and it's easy to swap over to twill after you've done your plain weave samples. So I did do some plain weave samples alongside some twill samples alongside the plain weave samples. And then the final page. And you can actually see, because of how they photographed it, I had written in the article that from certain angles, you could really see the difference in how the light reflects off of the samples. And they were able to highlight that in the photos and actually take it from the angle so that you could actually see it, which was incredible. I was so pleased to see that. So thank you to Lisa, who's a friend of mine, and JC for thinking of me and for including me in that first issue. It was really lovely to be able to do all of that for you guys, but also I just felt really pleased and really humbled and really all the things for being included in that first issue. Yeah. Thanks, Amanda. She said, while reading your article, I wondered where you got the patience to make all these samples. It ended up being a total of 3 warps that I had to warp up. So this was back in the fall that I was working on all of this, from the summer into the fall. So I had the warp that was singles S plied Z, and then I had the warp that was singles Z plied S, and then I had the combo warp. So yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot of weaving and it was a lot, yeah. You know what, Dion? I think it probably can be, and I think that would definitely be some experimentation for you to do, for sure. But yeah, I think it probably can be. And I personally, when it comes to weaving, tend to work in 2-ply yarns, but definitely singles, especially in the weft, works so beautifully that do some sampling and do some playing. But I think yeah, it probably does apply. Because really what we're looking at is the final step. We're looking at the plying. So when we're looking at these fabrics, we're really looking at what does a Z plied yarn do, and what does an S plied yarn do, and how do they reflect the light differently. It would be the same with singles. What does a S spun yarn finished S do, and what does a Z look like? So I definitely think it would, a lot of the same learnings would apply. Thank you, Rebecca. That is really kind. I remember the beginning of your weaving journey, to go from there to being in the top tier of weaving teachers today. Thank you. That's very kind. I don't consider myself in the top tier of weaving teachers, but I appreciate the sentiment. That's very, very kind. So this is my little book. How do I organize my weaving projects? We have talked so much over the years about knitting that I feel like we need to do some catch up with some of the weaving, because as we work more and more with our hand spun in various forms, one of those forms is weaving. So I started this little book a long time ago to start to organize some of my projects that I wanted to keep samples of yarn for, and I wanted to keep like little drafts that I was working through. And this is the article coming up in the drape issue of Weft. I think it's the 3rd issue of Weft it'll be in, the drape issue. So these are all my notes for the drape issue. All of the yarns that I spun, the different things, these are all samples of them, and then all of the measurements on and off loom. So as I've been sort of organizing myself, I pulled out, and I will show you the photos. We talked about this last show, so I'll go through this quickly. These are all of my notes that I was talking about last show about my LB pullover. So let me just show you the yarn so that you have something pretty to look at while I'm chatting. This is the pattern that I'm talking about. So it's this really simple pullover style drop shoulder. There's about 6 things to have to cut out for the pattern. I'm going to do view A, which is the top one with the slightly thicker neck, versus this slightly thinner, so turtleneck versus sort of a crew neck. I was having a really interesting conversation with my mom recently. So my dad gave my mom a serger we figure it was about 1994, 1995. And at the time, my mom had been really wanting a serger because she was doing a whole bunch of fashion design classes at the local university. And because she was thinking about leaving teaching, and she was seriously thinking about doing more seamstress type work. And my mom is a beautiful sewer. Like, I just want to put that little plug in there for her. Like, she's a beautiful, very precise sewer. But she never, and she took tons and tons of courses on her serger, the overlocker, for those overseas. But she never really got super into it. And so she did a lot of courses, but didn't put a lot of it into practice. So when I started talking about weaving with my hand spun and then making clothing with my hand spun, my mom was like, you really should be serging those seams, not just zigzagging them on your machine. She's like, you get a beautiful finished seam if you serge. I think you should take a class rather than her trying to teach me, which was totally fine. And I tend to work a lot quicker than my mom too. So I think we would both probably get a bit frustrated if she started trying to teach me. And woven fabric, like hand woven fabric, is very different from what you purchase in a fabric store, you know, that's commercially woven. So starting in June, I'm actually doing a serger class every Wednesday night for 4 weeks, which I'm really looking forward to. And I'm hoping that I can use the learnings from that course to finish this. I've already got all my pattern pieces. I've already measured it all out. I know exactly how much fabric I need, etc., etc. So this is the yarn that I'm using. We talked about this last time. The hand spun is the warp. It is this Beaumont alpaca 50/50 roving that Eve gifted to me years and years ago. I spun it into a 2-ply and then it sat in my stash. In December, I threw it in the dye pots alongside Rowan Hayes, which is the other yarn. It's all skeined up and dyed as well. The dye broke, which is why I ended up with sort of this very interesting effect. Dion and I worked through what went wrong, what went right. And I did actually knit it up into a little swatch, which I shared on the podcast. And I think it was around episode 300-ish. And I really liked it, but I had quite a bit of yardage and I had enough yardage to weave. So let's talk about it. So this ended up being the start of this project. So for those who aren't weavers yet, just bear with me for a minute, because by the time I finish talking, I hope that you'll sort of understand what I'm saying. And this will be something that you can kind of file away in the back of your mind for future when people are talking about things. You'll be like, oh yeah, I've seen that. I know what that looks like. So this is my Leclerc Jack loom. It is a 45-inch wide loom. It takes up quite a fair footprint. Mike and I pulled it out a couple weekends ago and we gave it a really good clean. We got all of the dust and cotton stuff that had kind of accumulated under the loom over the last year. Cleaned it all out. I wiped all the surfaces off, got all the dust off of it. I try to do this every 6 months. I'm not the best housekeeper, but when it comes to this kind of stuff, I'm actually pretty good. And Mike and I pulled it away from the wall, and it was so funny because this is actually technically my dining room. And as you can see, I do not have a dining room table. My mom still to this day, I think, kind of shakes her head about it. But anyways, the loom is there instead. We pulled the loom away from the wall and both Mike and I were like, oh my gosh, this room is so huge now. So put some negative space around your loom, like pull it away from the wall, and all of a sudden the room will feel bigger. So this white warp that's on the back of the loom, you might be thinking like, but Rach, that's not the color of the yarn that you dyed. No, it's not. So this is about 3 yards of 2/8 cotton. It's just plain undyed bleached white cotton, 8/2 cotton. And I wound a warp that, like I said, is about 3 yards because I wanted enough to be able to do something with it afterwards. I have a couple of ideas. This is what we call a dummy warp. So the reason for a dummy warp is every loom has a certain amount of waste at the back of the loom. When you cut off your fabric, you have all of this wasted yarn at the back of the loom. This loom on average has about 18 to 20 inches of yarn that gets wasted, that you cannot weave because it comes off the back on that apron, that cream piece of cloth there, and it comes up to the back where the heddles are, those silver things there, and you just can't weave any further. So this loom is about 18 to 20 inches. I've measured it over the years, and that seems to be about the average. Sometimes it's 18, sometimes it's 20. I've never had more than 20, but I've never had less than 18. So a dummy warp gives you the buffer that you need to be able to weave right to the end of your hand spun warp. So the idea is that you sort of roughly warp the loom. And when I say rough, it's pretty rough. And you go, so these are all the warp chains. I don't chain my warps, but for those who do, that's what you would do. So here you can see that I'm starting to do what we call spread the warp. So the warp is being spread along the back of the loom. through the least sticks, and that's that cross that you see at the back there, through what's called a rattle. So the rattle is those pointy nails that are clamped to the shafts, and you just put your yarns through, and it just spreads the warp across the back of the loom so that it's nice and even, and you don't have all of your warp threads in one little area and then you're trying to weave out at 20 inches and it's all just, you know, that's when you get into like tensioning issues. So you spread your warp. So this is all with 8/2 cotton. I'm not working with my hand spun yet at all. This is it all completely done. You can see the clamps that's holding the rattle. And because the Leclerc doesn't come with a rattle, and it's sort of an invention of Jane Stafford to use a rattle on these jack looms and on these, because these looms back in the 70s and 80s, most of these looms were sectionally warped. And I do have 2 sectional warps for this loom. I have a sectional warp for 2 inches wide and a sectional warp for 1 inch wide. But I use Jane Stafford's warping method mostly because I don't weave at a really super fine set. I weave it sort of, you know, with wool. So it's sort of around, you know, anywhere from, you know, 12 ends per inch to 18, 20 ends per inch. So I haven't really done a lot of sectional warping yet. And so I use Jane Stafford's method with the rattle. So if you want to learn more about her method and how she does all that, Jane Stafford's online weaving school is the place to go. So this is it. Getting ready. I wound all of my hand spun onto weaving bobbins to create my warp and wind the warp, which I did. So these are, I have 4 sections. So this was where all the math came in. So I had to figure out, based on how much of the Rowan haze that I had, the yardage that I could tolerate and how much I could, how much fabric I could weave for the length of fabric that I needed for the pattern pieces, which I laid out on the ground and measured to get the right measurements for that, to know how wide I needed to make it, accounting for draw-in and shrinkage and all the rest of it. So it ended up being, this is 520 ends. So I wound 4 chains. I don't chain them like I said, but 4 chains of 130 ends each for a total of 520 ends. So this is them getting ready. So this is where you understand the dummy warp. And if you're sort of up to this point being like, oh my goodness, Rachel, you're talking gibberish. I don't understand what you're talking about. I'm not a weaver. I'm not going to be a weaver. I don't need to know any of this. But this is where the what's that saying? The wheels hit the road. What's that saying? Anyways, this is where it's like, it'll start to make sense. So I have my dummy warp in the rattle, and it's sitting there ready to, at this point, if you weren't going to do anything else, you would just pull it all out of the rattle, you would put it through the heddles, and then you would put it through the reed, and you'd be ready to spin, ready to weave. But for me, now what I need to do is put my least sticks. I have 2 sets of least sticks. The second set goes on the front of the loom, and I put the hand spun warp through the cross. So you can see over there in the corner over there, you can see them sitting on the least sticks. And then I pull them apart one by one in order, and I tie them onto the dummy warp. So you cut the back of your warp chain, the back of your warp, you cut that loop where it goes around your warping board or warping mill, whatever you're using. You cut that and you tie each individual strand, all 520 ends, onto your dummy warp. The reason for doing this is I can then weave all the way to the back of my hand spun warp. I can go all the way to the end within a couple of inches. So that's going to maximize all of that hand spun yardage so that I can use all of it and get a full 80 inches worth of fabric, which is what I need for my sewing pattern. So this is them all tied up together. It actually didn't take as long as I thought it would. I was able to get one chunk, like each quarter, done in about a day, and standing there just tying them on, you know, and you get into a little rhythm and it gets faster and faster. And I actually was really surprised how quickly it went. The 4th one, the last one, was like, it was done like that. And I think by then I just was in a rhythm and I was getting really, really fast. The party doesn't start yet, Christine. So once it's all wound on, because you're still dealing with just the rattle. It's a rough sleigh. You haven't warped the loom yet. You've just wound your warp on. You're still using the rattle. So from there, you start to pull everything out of your rattle and you start to thread. So all of the heddles got threaded in a 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way across. This is more of it. So that's the first quarter done, the second quarter done, and then I have the last two to do. Because of how the Leclerc is set up, I tend to thread one way and then I thread the other way. So I do one half of the warp backwards and then I do the other half of the warp. And you just have to keep track of where the middle of your warp is so that you know where to start. That is something that I learned from one of my weaving mentors, and I just learned it that way so that I just do it that way. It's not because you have to do it that way. It is a little tiny bit more complicated, but you end up with your warp perfectly centered. So this is, now I'm slaying my reed. So you thread your heddles, which are in behind, and then you slay your reed, pull all of your hand spun through, and now the party begins. Now the party starts, Christine. The weaving. So this has been a really interesting project to weave because the Rowan Haze is so light and it is so airy, and it actually just kind of comes apart if you pull on it hard enough. And so as I was throwing, and I'm weaving a full 40-inch wide piece of fabric, and the draw-in is about 1 inch on each side. So it ends up being about 38 inches with draw-in once you've got your fabric. And I'm finding that getting a really super consistent beat is actually quite challenging. So every inch or so, I've been stopping and checking and making sure that I'm weaving the right beat and that I'm just placing that warp really super gently and putting it where I want it so that as I beat, I'm not I'm not beating really hard or not hard enough that I end up with it being too open. So this is one of those things where I've been using my 1 inch measure for picks per inch, and I've actually been counting, and like honestly it's every like 4 or 5 minutes I stop, I check, and then I stop, and then I check. So I've I've woven about 30, I'm further along than I was on this photo now. That bobbin is actually finished now. I'm about 35 inches into this, so I'm just under halfway. 40 inches will be halfway. But I'm having to be very, very careful about how I beat and making sure that that beat is exactly right. And it's actually not exactly what I had originally planned. So in the reed, I set the ends per inch at 13 ends per inch, which sounds a bit crazy, but 14 was too tight and 12 was too open. So I went with 13. It's an 8 dent reed, so I threaded it hard, 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 2. For those who know what that means, that's how I did it. And so every 13 ends I looped together so that I made sure I kept track and made sure that everything was correct. In the fabric though, it's weaving up at more like 14 ends per inch. And if I beat to 13 ends per inch, it just gets too tight. So it's ended up being 12 picks per inch, 14 ends per inch. So it's a little tiny bit warp faced, but there's still 26 ends in a square inch. So I'm happy. So I'm gonna leave it. For those who are weaving nerds, you know what I just said and what I mean. For those who are just starting out and are sort of learning the jargon, just ignore what I just said. I did, Rebecca, yeah. So the first couple of inches of this fabric, I was playing around with beating it a little bit tighter and then beating it a little bit more open. If I need to use that piece of fabric, it'll be fine. It's not terrible because I was right in and around 12 ends per inch. Sorry, 12 picks per inch, 13 picks per inch, 14 picks per inch. The 14 was just, I had to beat so hard. It just didn't make any sense. 13, but 12 picks per inch, 14 ends per inch was, I was getting a balanced weave and it was sitting up really perfectly. Yeah, and that's the thing, Lisa. She was saying that Susan Frick always advocated for much lower sets on clothing fabrics for drape, and that's sort of what I found with this was if I go really super dense and I weave to 14 picks per inch, 14 ends per inch, it's just the fabric's not going to have any give and it's not going to have any drape to it. It's going to be really it won't be super stiff, but it's not going to be not stiff. I mean, these are soft fibers, so it's going to be soft, but it's maybe not going to drape quite as well. But if I go for a balanced weave of 26 ends in a square inch, I think it'll have a nice feel without being too dense. Also without being too open. It'll be a nice mix. And I did come to that with some sampling, especially with some other fibers that I was playing around with that I can't talk about yet because it's in the WEFT article for drape. I did use a bunch of those learnings and I applied it here. So there is that as well. So I've got all of my measurements in my book of my on loom and off loom. I'll have all of my stuff written down, and then I'll be able to reflect back and decide whether or not I made the right decision. And I kind of feel like in this situation, if I don't just go ahead and do it and get the fabric off and have the results and have it in front of me and be able to do some reflection, I'm never going to learn. And if I don't do big piece of fabric to be able to do clothing, like the stuff that I want to make, I'm just going to end up in indecisive zone. Like I'm just going to be, what's that, analysis paralysis? I'm not going to be able to like actually get this stuff done. So I think it's better to just try, have a slightly more open set that'll have nice drape. Like Lisa said, you don't want stiff clothing. And then I can go from there. And right now on the loom, it feels so nice. So nice. It's going to be very lightweight, the woven sweatshirt kind of thing. It's going to be very lightweight, which I think is actually good because I do get quite warm and we don't get really, really super cold weather here. So it'll be something that I can actually wear. So, and I'm just noticing that my Solaris matches my fabric. The other cool thing, because the dye broke, you can really see it in this photo and the previous photo. You can see because of those dark spots from the dye breaking from when I dyed the Rowan Haze, it's coming up with this really fun, it's not plaid, but it's not plaid. It does have a certain kind of plaid-like feel to it. You can really see it in this photo. It's got this sort of horizontal and vertical feel to it, which is I'm really liking. In real life, it looks really cool. So I am very, very happy with that. Yeah, exactly, Eveline. She says, like, unless you want to make a jacket with really strong shaping, that's exactly it. And something like this, I'm not going to want a whole bunch of, this isn't going to have a bunch of like darts and a lot of shaping. And like you want something that's just, you know, blocky and it's going to fall really nicely. And, you know, I think I would rather brush this and full it completely and bring up the nap of the fabric rather than having a really super thick, heavy piece of fabric, if that makes sense. So yeah, Lisa says, even with jackets, you tend to get the material stiffer with fulling and brushing. Yeah. Thank you, Rebecca. She says the color distribution looks great. Thank you. So that is that. Now I was also trying to finish off other warps because I have, where did I put it? Another dummy warp wound. So this is the dummy warp, and underneath, hang on, I don't want to ruin this. And another 3 warp chains for my Braid blend and color study. So these are the 3 yarns I talked about in the last show. I'll let you go back and have a look at that. This is the order I think that I'm going to put it on the loom. I played around with a couple of different orders, and I think this one was the one that worked the best of all of them. So the dummy warp needs to go onto the Louette spring. This one is only, unlike the other one that was 520 ends, this one is only, how long was it? 180 ends. So I ended up with 3 sets of 60 ends per inch. So, sorry, 60 ends. So it'll be a much kinder to get it on the loom in a relatively like timely fashion. Yeah, that's right, Christine. The LB pullover, it's kind of like a fisherman's smock or like a lightweight sweatshirt. Yeah, it kind of has like a, you know, it's got you can do it as a crew neck or a turtleneck, but it sort of has this a drop shoulder. It's just like a smock. Yeah. So I had the tail end of the Trellis warp on the loom, and of course I talked about it at length last time, my big gradient stole, and it's really long, and I was able to use up all the yarn and blah blah. I still had another 1.5 yards on the loom, so I put on way more than I thought that I had. It probably was one of those things when I was winding the warp, I added a little bit for the cross. I sometimes do that so that it just works out on the warping board. And it ended up actually adding quite a lot. So what I ended up doing was a little bit of a self-study. I did 2 of these, as you can see. So this one down below, last show, I'll go to the big camera for you guys. The last show, we remember my Fish Lips Kiss Heel that I finished, that were I was calling them my radiation socks, my cancer socks. I had about 95 yards of that yarn left. So this was the Sweet Georgia Yarns. It was March of 2016 club colorway. It was superwash merino nylon in the panorama colorway. And it was, because it was chain plied, there was no barber poling basically in it at all. Like there's a tiny bit when you have transitions of color, but for the most part, it's just one color. So solid colors. And so what I decided to do was I took a skein of yarn. I'll show this to you guys in just a second. It's a skein of yarn that I spun up in 2014, I think. And it's very, very similar colors. It just happened to work out that I had made bats that were in a very similar color to panorama. But this one is incredibly barber poled. And it was basically marling the entire bat, or the entire yarn, sorry. Whereas this one, there was no marling. So I just wove off the end of the warp by studying the difference and how these two come out differently. So I'll just talk about this one for a moment. So the way that the trellis pattern works, it's in Bertha Gray Hayes's book. If you look up Bertha Gray Hayes, her book will come up, but it's in there, the trellis pattern. It's toward the end of the book. I feel like it's on page 91, but that's probably wrong. But it's called the trellis. You can find it. It's woven, Overshot is woven in blocks. So block A, block B, block C, block D. And on 4 shafts. This particular pattern is on 4 shafts. You can weave Overshot on multiple shafts, but this particular pattern is on 4 shafts. So you have 4 blocks, block A, block B, block C, block D. And, oh, hi Lily, good to see you. So the stole that I did, the big long one, was woven in the following pattern. It was woven A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D, and so on. So I wanted to see not only how the yarns changed the pattern and how well you could see the pattern if you had barber poling versus a sort of what I consider like a clean yarn. So a yarn that's not barber poling and not variegated, but also weaving block A, B, C, D, C, B, A, C, B, C, D, C, D, C, B. I have to read it out. Okay, it goes A, B, C, D, C, B, A, B, C, D, C, B, A. So if you see, for the weavers, you know what I'm talking about. You're like, oh yeah, okay. You're basically weaving rose path, right? A, B, C, D, C, B, A. So what ends up happening, if you look at the dark spots in here, this is woven A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D. So what ends up happening is block A is here. This is actually block A here. A, B, C, D, and you get the two next to each other. So you get these really cool little, like they're meant to be like little flowers. And then you get like the trellis in behind, and you get like 2 of these one after the other. Whereas with this one, because I broke it up and I did A, B, C, D, C, B, A, B, C, D, you know what I'm saying? You end up with the A block and D block separated. So A, B, C, D, C, where is it? C, B, A. So isn't that cool? It just changes the pattern. It just makes it different. It changes it. Whereas this one's just woven straight, A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D. So what I wanted to see between the two and the differences between the two was same colors, different yarns, different color combinations, bat versus comb top, 2-ply versus chain ply, brighter, muted. But also it's really incredible, all of this barber poling and all of this color marling, especially because it color marled with lighter colors, how much the pattern gets lost. And that was what I wanted to prove, was even in these darker spots where you have the darker blue coming through, and actually in real life this is quite a bit darker than what's registering on the camera. I think it's just because of the lights and everything. Maybe if I hold it up here, this is more like what it's like. But it's amazing how this just gets lost. And then in here, I'll put it back on the other camera, where you have this really, really light chunk of spinning, because I was just spinning, you know, little mini bats one after the other, it's almost completely lost. And it's good to see that, because we kind of know that in our head, like, oh yeah, that's going to be low contrast. But look at how much we lose the pattern. And like in real life, you can see it, and you can see that there's a pattern, but it's not to the same extent as the solid. The solid really comes through in a beautiful way. So these two, what I was hoping to do was that these would be long enough that I would be able to kind of create like little like cowls, but I ran out of warp. I just couldn't make them long enough. So I hemmed them and I made them into like a table runner. So this is kind of the idea that they'll be sitting on a table runner. So this is the first one, the panorama. And then, and you can see it up close, like how effective that was. You still get the striping. Some people won't like the striping, which I totally understand and totally get, but you can see how effective it is compared to this one. Oh, hang on, compared to this one. So this yarn was actually yarn that I spun up back in 2014. It was bats that I made with my friend Diana, and then I kept on making them at home and just jumbled them all up and made them into, little batlings. And some of you will remember, this is one of my most favorite things that I ever knit. I still to this day wear it a ton. I've had to mend it a few times. I called it my big vanilla shawl. It was just vanilla and then garter at the bottom. Look how young I look. And I'm going to pause it here because if you look, because all of the yarn was marled, like every skein, every yarn was marled. Look at the difference between weaving with it and knitting. Like, I think in the knitting, it's actually really super effective. And like I said, it's one of my most worn projects. I still wear it to this day. It's one of my shawls that it's a go-to. I pick it out. I wear it all the time. But in the weaving, not quite as effective. In the overshot, not quite as effective. I think I would want to see this in more of a plain weave sampler or a twill, 2-2 twill sampler, where the focus is the yarn, rather than in something like this that's float work with a supplementary weft, where you've got where the barber pulling actually takes away from the pattern. But if you don't have samples to show that, it's really hard to articulate it. So really great. I loved both of them, and I really, really, really like it. So yeah, in a woven shawl, exactly, Dion. Yeah, you wouldn't necessarily want the marled yarn in a woven shawl, exactly. Yeah, really cool. And it's fun to look at that kind of stuff and kind of look back and say like what you like and what you don't like and the differences between the two, because it's the exact same pattern, woven in a different consecutive order, but it's the same pattern. The other interesting thing, this one, because the yarn was a little bit more, I think the yarn was a little tiny bit thicker even though when I was weaving it, it actually didn't feel that way. It felt like this one was. This one resulted in a little bit more draw-in. It's a little bit smaller when I matched them up. This one is actually about 1/2 inch bigger, and obviously a little bit longer because I wove off the end of the warp. And so this one's a little bit smaller, but this one actually drew in and shrunk a little bit more than this one. And I suspect that might be the merino. This one is a mix of Corriedale, merino, sparkle, silk. Like, it's a real dog's breakfast of fibers. So really interesting. Yeah. Just like you wouldn't use it in a ferrule pattern with a mid-gray like that. Exactly, Rebecca, exactly. Because like, look at how low contrast that is. I mean, it just wouldn't work, right? So interesting. Oh, lovely, Lisa. I want pecan rolls. Not fair. All right, I think that is it for today. We have been talking for 1 hour and 45 minutes, you guys. These podcast episodes are getting longer and longer. The podcast is supposed to be an hour. I don't remember the last time we've had an hour-long show. Remember for a while there, the show was like 20, 25, 30 minutes long. Those days are long gone. There's just way too much to talk about. There's way too much to share. Way too way too much to cover, but that's okay because we all have lots of fun, and I'm so glad to have you guys here. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you for being here. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Rebecca will be back next week with the Wool Circle, same time at 11 a.m. Pacific next Tuesday. So watch your Patreon notifications, your email inbox for that, and so you have all the links to the show when it is published. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Deidre. She says fabulous show. Thank you. That means a lot. I hope you guys have a really great weekend. Maybe it's getting a bit sunny where you are and you can spend some time outside. And thanks, Eveline. She says, so fun hearing you nerd on weaving. Thank you. We had a wonderful conversation after the last podcast. I'll just put this in really quickly. Under hashtag podcast chat in the Slack channel. You guys were so helpful, and I really appreciated everybody's thoughts and comments. I read every one of them at least twice. And that was it was really, really helpful to clarify sort of the weaving content and whatnot. I thank you so much. Yeah, thanks, Pauline. She says, great to listen to all your enthusiasm. That said, we will continue to have weaving content on the podcast for the foreseeable future because I cannot do a separate show, which is fine. And I appreciate you guys being here. So have a wonderful couple weeks. I will see you again on June. How is it June already? June 3rd. That is crazy. It is my birthday month. Me and Mike have our birthdays a couple days apart. And we have the run-up Patreon anniversary on the 16th. So please mark your calendars for that Monday, June 16th. And I will see you guys next week in the Wool Circle with Rebecca. Bye, everyone.